Right. Mulching mowers. I am a huge fan of mulching mowers. A mulching mower is the type of mower that you don't have to bag. It chops the grass clippings up very finely and they break down into the soil. Now, contrary to popular belief, they do not add to thatch for the most part. In certain situations they can, but 90% of the time they don't. It can reduce the needed fertilizations per year by 1 or by a third. So instead of doing 3 applications, you would just do 2, because this will take care of 1/3 of the lawn's nitrogen needs just by putting those grass clippings back into the soil. Plus, it will cut your mowing time down also by 1/3 to 1/2, because you're not having to stop to bag the clippings. The only time I bag my lawn is when I need clippings to put into my garden for mulch to keep the weeds down. Otherwise, I just leave it right there. Now, the previous 2 homes I've had have had really well-drained soil, and even in the spring, if it was a little bit of extra turf and it wasn't all composting in, I didn't care. I just left it. I might mow over it twice, but I did not have the potential for a thatch problem because my soil was so well drained. Thatch, a 1/2 inch is healthy for the turf. It's considered normal. More than a 1/2 inch, then what your first step is to look at the irrigation, make sure you're deep watering as much as you can. After that, you would step up to a aerator, and you would aerate in the spring and the fall, and you might even be able to do it in the middle of the summer. I'd rather see you aerate more often to pull the thatch plugs up and introduce more soil to see if you can break it down that way. The last option is power raking. I don't like power raking because it really damages the turf, but if you've got 2 or 3 inches of thatch, it's not disappearing, a power rake may be a good option for a 1 or 2 time use before you have to tear the lawn out and start over. Yes, any organic matter you reintroduce to the soil breaks down, and if you were to dig up, let's say, a 20-year-old lawn, and the topsoil under that lawn is going to be almost like a prairie soil, because that's what you're doing. You have a prairie out there. It's a prairie biome. Your grazer is your lawnmower. You're mulching it back in, and you're putting the nutrients back in there. And so you create a prairie-type soil under your lawn. It takes 6 or 7 years for that to start to form. But even in a clay soil, you will get that. And that organic matter, as the dead roots and dead crowns break down, will form those aggregates and make a very healthy soil underneath. But it takes time. If you have a lot of traffic, I would aerate at least once a year, unless you have a sand. If you have sandy soil, there's probably no need, but if it's a loam or a clay, aerating once a year would probably be beneficial. If it's really sandy, you may not need to worry about it because it's extremely difficult to get compacted sand, which you're lucky. You have sand. Now, if you're going to tear your lawn out and you're going to try seed one more time, by all means power rake, because you want that new seed to come up. But if you have a fairly decent situation and you're just trying to reinvigorate a bit, heavily aerate and put the seed down to avoid the damage. Thatch reducing compaction. So reducing compaction, that's why we aerate, is to reduce compaction, increase the microorganisms in the thatch layer. And then the aeration, you want to pull out the plugs. Don't get the spike aerators that just go into the soil that actually cause the soil compaction. You want to be pulling out a minimum of a 2-inch plug when you aerate. All right, let's talk about some insects and diseases. Now, a lot of times you see brown spots in your lawn and you automatically assume that it's drought stress, and so you kick the sprinklers up hoping that it'll recover, but oftentimes the brown spots increase. And so what I would do to tell what's going wrong with the lawn if you're developing brown spots is this. The first thing I would do is get a screwdriver with a long shaft on it, take it out to your lawn the day after you irrigate and try to shove it in the brown spot areas. If it goes in 3, 4, 5, 6 inches really easily, you're irrigating deep enough and the lawn should be green. So if the screwdriver goes in, you can eliminate drought. The next step is to grab the brown turf, firmly but gently pull. Don't brace both hands and just yank for all you're worth, but firmly but gently pull. If the sod or the turf pulls up really easily in clumps or almost like a carpet, you have insect problems. Now, if you've got sufficient irrigation and the turf does not pull up, then there's a good chance there's a fungal disease or maybe spider mites, which are a lot harder to diagnose. And at that point, you'll probably have to get a sample and bring it to the diagnostic clinic or mail it up to campus for them to take a look and let the diagnosticians go from there. 80 to 90% of the time, it's either drought or insects that are causing the brown spots. Okay, white grubs and bill bugs cause very similar damage, so I'm going to cover them together. But they feed on crowns and roots. The bigger they get, the deeper they go. They're very difficult to control, especially late in their life cycle. Japanese beetle was here. I just make brief mention of it. The UDAF says that they're at undetectable levels. Now, that doesn't mean that they're gone. It just means they can't find any. So they think they've maybe gotten rid of them in Utah County. Mass chafer, black turf antennaeus, and June beetles are among these. You know, the June beetle, we'll show you a picture of it in just a second here. This is 10-line June beetle. This is what sticks to your hair and shirt at night when you're under a light outside. This is the June beetle, more common in the mountain valleys. They have a 2 to 3 year life cycle, and they can be fairly damaging. Okay, that's a picture of mass chafer. Here's black turf antennaeus. They are big or small. Okay, bill bugs. We have 3 or 4 species of bill bugs here that feed on our lawns. The most common is Kentucky bluegrass, and the other is the Rocky Mountain bill bug, but they both do the same damage. Their life cycles can vary a little bit, but generally they overwinter as adults and lay eggs in the spring. Control. Now, I want to mention here that when I worked at the garden center especially, I'd have folks come in and they say, I'm fertilizing 5 or 6 times a year. I water every day. I mow 2 or 3 times a week. I'm the one that should have the perfect lawn, but my neighbor that has the car on blocks and waters maybe once a week and mows who knows how often, never gets grubs. I always get them. How come? Overwatering and over-fertilizing. That turf might look beautiful, but because you're overwatering and over-fertilizing, you're stimulating it to grow much more quickly than it naturally would. A plant puts what are called secondary photosynthates, or basically defensive chemicals, into their roots and leaves. Which lawn is going to be tastier? The lettuce lawn or the crappy lawn? The lettuce lawn that we're over-fertilizing and overwatering. And so overly maintained turf is the most susceptible to diseases and insects. So when I was up in Cache Valley, I watered on an as-need basis. I fertilized once or twice a year in addition to mulching. I never had lawn grubs. If you let the soil dry out, it will actually kill a lot of the eggs off. And I mean, this is why folks get a lot of grubs. Now, you can get them, even if you don't over-maintain, but you're a lot less likely. Now, with that being said, there are a number of products out there that you can use if you get grubs to get rid of them. And I want to mention first that if you are into more of the natural or organic, you can order nematodes and fungal spores that will get into the grub species, depending on which ones they are, that over time can help control them. And you're trying to create a system to support these nematodes and the fungal organisms in your soil. Now, if you want to opt for chemicals, the most common is called Merit. It's available at every garden center, and it was the only one available for a long time. There's some newer formulations coming out with different things that are probably more effective. The other one I want to specifically point out is this Acelepryn. The only product it is in is Scott's Grub X. Now, the reason I point it out is that it is reduced risk and it has very low toxicity to kids and pets. But it's still toxic to the insects. And so if you need to apply something, this one's most likely going to be the least risk of anything you're going to put on. The only consumer product that has it in it is Scott's Grub X. I don't generally recommend one product over another, but in this situation, I feel like it's justified. It has to go on about the 1st of May because it takes longer to break down to become effective, but you'll get about a 6-month residual out of it. Otherwise, the Merit is fine, and some of these others are too. Now, if you've missed your preventative application in May or June, and you've been accidentally watering thinking the brown spots were drought and they're actually bill bugs, and you're in the middle of July, oftentimes it's recommended you don't apply anything. If you do, the only products out there that will be somewhat effective are Dilox or 7. They will make it through the thatch layer, and they will last for about 48 hours. So you apply them and water them in, and then hope for the best. The damage is done, and you may even see residual damage because when the turf is fed on, it doesn't immediately die. It may take a week or 10 days. And so you could put this down, and the lawn can keep dying for that long, and you don't know if you've been effective or not. So in that situation, you're probably going to want to do some sort of a preventative, whether it is the nematodes or something like a celloprene. Okay. Sod webworm. If you walk in your lawn and you see a little off-white moss flying up all over the place, they're laying eggs and they're feeding on your lawn. Now, 1 or 2 here and there are fine, but if you're getting 12 or 15 per footprint, it's time to apply something. They're a 1/3 of an inch long, off-white, and this is what their little larvae or the little caterpillar looks like. Now, these are fairly easy to control. Any of the preventatives I've mentioned, the celloprene or the Merit, will control them through the season, but if you need to do an instant application, an inexpensive granular insecticide that costs under $10 is just fine. Now, because they have an indeterminate life cycle, you'll have adults, caterpillars, and eggs at the same time, you probably will need to apply 2 or 3 times to knock them all out. A moist soil surface encourages egg survival. One strategy that's a non-chemical to get rid of lawn grubs, your lawn will survive, the roots will survive on 1 inch of water a month for about 1 year to 2 years. So if you brown your lawn out and only give it 1 inch of water a month for 2 or 3 months, you'll kill every grub and sod webworm, and then you can re-water, and in a month to 6 weeks it'll revive it, but who's willing to do that? And so even moderately drying out will reduce the survival of the eggs and the young. We don't deal with subterranean sod webworm here. It was a problem in Cache County and Box Elder. It's slowly moving south. This is one that's kind of tricky because it's a sod webworm species, but it feeds deeper and late in the season. And so if you've used a preventative like Merit and you put it down in June, it peters out by August, and you have no protection against this. And so there's a thriving business up in Cache County for reapplications of grub preventatives in late season to prevent this, because in certain areas it's pretty bad. But we've still probably got quite a while before it makes it. It seems to be moving fairly slowly. Okay, fairy ring. A fungus that's breaking down organic matter in the soil releases enough nitrogen to cause excessive growth in that ring. This is one that you can fertilize to mask it, or just let it grow into the neighbor's lawn and you'll eventually get rid of it. Aeration alone can sometimes get rid of those. You can put a fungicide down if you want, and that may be more effective. Okay, this is probably the disease of most concern over the last 5 or 6 years, is a necrotic ring spot. This is one that's very tough to get rid of. If you manage your lawn well, you're less likely to get it. What you would do, instead of fertilizing 2 times a year, 3 times a year, you would fertilize half applications and double it. So you do 6 half applications. Instead of watering twice a week deeply, water 3 or 4 times a week to keep the soil a little more moist. Sometimes that can help the grass outcompete the fungus. Top dress with new grass seed that's hopefully resistant to it. Fungicide applications are about 1/3 to 50% effective. You can hire a professional company, or if you want to spend the money, there's one fungicide called Pillar that is very expensive. It's about $80 a bag. And from what I'm understanding from lawn applicators, it's their best hope for getting rid of it. It might be 50 to 70% effective, but there's no guarantee. It's deeper in the soil, and that's why it's hard to get rid of. And so if you have this or are more curious about it, if you Google USU and necrotic ring spot, it'll bring up a very good fact sheet on how and why and what about this particular microorganism or this particular disease. Usually you will start with a little brown spot that develops into the C shape, and oftentimes these will coalesce into big brown spots. Sometimes you get recovery in the middle and then it'll get it again. It looks a little bit like fairy ring, but the grass dies. It may last for 3 months and it may last for 5 years. Okay, snow mold. This is common when we get early fall snow and the ground has not frozen. It's also very common on the north and east sides of buildings, anywhere that you would pile snow. What happens is the fungi, and there's 2 or 3 of them, that cause very similar symptoms, but they thrive at temperatures right above freezing. If you have a heavy leaf litter that wasn't raked off, that can also cause this. And eventually, what you get is these patches just like this, and this is as soon as the snow melts off. And then what you get after that are dead spots like this. Now, they generally do not kill the crowns, and so the only treatment you really need is just to rake this grass, fluff it up, and it'll recover within about a month. If you continually get it on north exposures, you may consider actually plowing the snow away from the area for a few weeks until the ground solidly freezes. In areas that you pile snow on a warmer day, spread it out on the pavement to melt it off. But anytime that you get snow sitting for an extended period of time, this becomes more likely. I talked earlier about the bent grass. This is a disease that bent grass is highly susceptible to, and it's fatal to it. So that's why the golf courses are using the milorganite or activated carbon, or even just hand shoveling their greens so that they don't get this. Animal urine blight. Now, your options. Number 1, get rid of the dog. Number 2, follow the dog around all day with a hose. For when it goes to the bathroom, you can hurry and squirt the area down, dilute the urine. Or, number 3, train it to go to the bathroom in one particular area. When I use pictures, I generally try to get them at least 100 miles away from where I'm teaching. The biggest trouble I ever got was I was using campus in Logan for teaching examples, and I did not know I had the head of the grounds in my class. And I got a talking to. So, okay, mushrooms in the lawn. This is usually an indication of a thatch layer or tree roots or construction waste. Yep. This is not the actual fungus right here. This is the reproductive body that spreads the spores. The actual fungus is 6 inches or a foot or 2 feet underground. So spraying that with a fungicide does no good. You're just killing the top. Okay. Now, if you get foliar fungal diseases, they can be extremely difficult to diagnose. And if it gets really bad, we probably need to send a sample off to campus, and they have a highly trained diagnostician, plant diagnostician that knows a lot of this very well. And a lot of times, if it requires more than just the dissecting scope, we have to mail them off. Campus charges $7, but it'll probably be the best $7 you've ever spent as far as diagnosing lawn problems. Just a few weeds and we'll get out of here. I want to talk quickly about pre-emergent. Pre-emergent kills newly germinating seed. It does not do anything against dormant seed, and there is not a pre-emergent in existence that can differentiate between flower seeds and weed seeds. So keep that in mind. The most common pre-emergent products used right now are Barricade, Dimension, and Preem, or prodiamine, dithiopyr, pendimethalin. They're just the common names of them. These are very good at preventing grasses. They will last anywhere from 30 days to all season, depending on the formulation. And you just need to look at the label. These are not very good against broadleaf weeds. And there's another product called Gallery, or isoxaben, that does a lot better against broadleaf. Now, you can, if you have to, apply both and get a synergistic effect. Now, a lot of times I'm sitting here talking about all these chemicals, and I feel like I need to take a shower when I'm done. And I'm not really advocating using them. I'm just making you aware of them. In a healthy lawn, you will not need to use them. That's actually spurge, Japanese spurge. It actually is very effective against puncture vine too. Okay, an organic option, make myself feel a little better. Corn gluten meal, the research is all over the place. Some researchers are saying it's wonderful. Others are saying it's next to garbage. Some of them are in the middle. It is more expensive. Now, the other advantage, though, is that it's a natural source of nitrogen, and for an organic source, it's very high in nitrogen. However, per unit of nitrogen, you pay about 4 times for this as you would 20-0-0. So that's the trade-off on using this for a nitrogen source, but it is completely organic. Three-way weed control, just be aware, Weed Be Gone is a combination of 3 different weed killers to gain a synergistic effect. It's actually best applied in the fall. Triclopyr is a specialty product that will kill certain weeds more effectively, especially mint family stuff, and also clover and plantains. So those are out there. You can find products with it in there. 4-Speed XT is one. And then there's what are called 4-way products that are still, again, best applied in the fall. And if you're going after things such as field bindweed in the lawn, these are a very good option. But again, you'd spray in late September.
Would that white top as well?
White top it would go after fairly well. Okay, so I talked about 2,4-D damage earlier. This is a linden tree. And how a lot of the active ingredients in these weed killers work is by causing uncontrolled cell growth, and so the cells eventually burst. This is spray drift, and so it caused uncontrolled cell growth, but not to the point of cell bursting. But you can see the results. This right here is a snowball bush that actually knotted in on itself because of a 2,4-D exposure. Okay, a natural option, Natria. Bayer, this is Bayer's version. Ortho has a version. Garden's Life has a version. But this is a chelated iron product that doesn't seem to harm lawns, but if you apply it at high enough rates, it'll eventually kill dandelions and other broadleaf weeds. It has to be applied twice at 3 to 4 weeks apart. The container that costs $20 does 200 square feet. So it's, again, because it's more natural, it's much more expensive, but it is an option. Okay, if you have actual crabgrass or actual foxtail and you need to know how to identify them in your lawn, there are products that will kill them after they emerge if you missed the pre-emergent application. The primary ingredient is quinclorac. What you would see is it would be like Trimec Plus or Weed Be Gone plus crabgrass control, or a couple of them. But quinclorac is the active ingredient, and that kills a lot of broadleaf as well as those particular grassy weeds. Okay, glyphosate. If you have things such as tall fescue in your lawn, glyphosate's the only option to get rid of it as far as homeowner options are concerned. And you just put a new plug of sod back in. Okay, some quick weeds. Dandelions, the only thing I want to get across here is that the fall is actually the best time to spray them out. Okay, red stem fillery, this is common in the spring. It's actually fairly resistant to a lot of weed killers, but it can be sprayed out. Late summer pre-emergent application is your best option, or a 4-way product like Speed Zone or Weed Free Zone. Okay, crabgrass. This is what crabgrass actually looks like. It emerges in May. It dies in late September, and it has kind of this crow's foot seed head. So when I'm talking about crabgrass, this is it. If you already have weedy grass in your lawn, it is not crabgrass. It's right now early May or early April. Okay, pre-emergent application when the forsythia blooms right here, and that's when you put down for crabgrass control. Then we've already covered that. This is foxtail right here. You can see where it gets its name off the seed head. It's actually the exact same control for crabgrass, so we won't spend too much time on it. Here's a picture of tall fescue that you get in your lawn. If you get that, it needs to be sprayed out to get rid of it. Bindweed, sometimes called morning glory. It's more properly called bindweed. A 4-way weed killer on the lawn in the fall, or a product containing quinclorac, like Weed Be Gone plus crabgrass control, are going to be more effective than just an inexpensive lawn weed killer. You can spray it out in the summer to partially control it, but you're going to get much better control by spraying this out in the fall, making sure it's well watered and happy. Spray it, that poison sits in the roots, and you can at least reduce the population in an area by 50% with one spray in the fall. You need to spray it for 3 or 4 years, but eventually you can get it 90% under control if you'll do that. I've got a little bit more information we're looking for. Just to be aware that seeds of field bindweed are viable in the soil for 20 to 50 years. It can spread by roots, by runners, and by seed. Okay, spurge pre-emergence such as gallery. It's the best way to control it because it has a waxy coating and it's very resistant to sprays. And clover, something containing triclopyr or a 4-way weed killer. If you want to get rid of it, I do not advocate spraying it out. It adds nitrogen to the soil, and in a lot of situations, it's just fine to leave it alone. But if you have to get rid of it, that's what you would use. And spray it in the fall. Okay, one last one, common mallow. Spray it in the fall with a 4-way weed killer, such as Speed Zone, 4-Speed XT, or Weed Free Zone. If you get it when it's young, if it's under 6 weeks old, and even if you just pop the top, it doesn't have the ability to regenerate. But it has to be less than 6 weeks old.